Hello everyone, welcome to Lukman IAS. Today in our The Hindu newspaper analysis, we are going to cover the most important and interesting aspects from The Hindu newspaper dated 22nd of June 2021. Okay, so let us quickly see the topics that we are going to cover for the day. We are going to understand the first topic, which is a case to decriminalize suicide. Okay, this topic is important from Indian polity perspective. This is covered in page 7 of the Hindu newspaper. Then we are going to understand about towards a more federal structure. This topic is important from Indian economy perspective. Okay, from economy section. This was also there in page 7 of the Hindu newspaper. Then we are going to understand about Supreme Court's take in the decision on ex gratia payment. We are going to understand what do we mean by ex gratia payment. Okay, so this topic is important under disaster management section. Okay, and the fourth topic that we are going to understand is Indian officials met at Taliban. Okay, met Taliban. It was confirmed by a Qatari official. Okay, we are going to understand various issues associated with these topics now. Okay, so today Lakshmikant sir was not available to take the Hindu newspaper analysis, so I have been given this responsibility. So I am going to cover the Hindu newspaper on behalf of Lakshmikant sir. Okay, so now let us understand the first topic. Let us see the heading. It says a case to decriminalize suicide. Okay, so the heading itself gives us some idea that suicide is a criminal offense in India. Okay, so suicide is considered as a criminal offense, and someone who tries to do suicide, he will also be considered as a criminal. So he will be put behind the bars. So this particular article or this particular editorial puts a case forward towards decriminalization of suicide. This article says why suicide should be decriminalized and why we should strike down the section 309 of the Indian Penal Code. Okay, so in that perspective we are going to understand various issues like what are the case laws that are associated towards criminalization of suicide, and what are the case laws that are against the criminalization of suicide. And at the same time we are going to understand about recent developments. Okay, we have a Medical Healthcare Act as well that talks about suicide related issues. Okay, so why this particular article came? Because the World Health Organization says that India has the highest suicide rate in the Southeast Asian region. Okay, World Health Organization has said that India has the highest rate of suicide in the Southeast Asian region. And apart from this, what are the issues, like what are those regions for which people commit suicide? Some of these regions are depression, chronic ill health, guilt, trauma, substance abuse, failure in exams, and loss of loved ones are some of the reasons which influence a person to commit suicide. Okay, and at the same time in India we have National Crime Records Bureau. Okay, there is a report which is known as National Crime Records Bureau. Okay, this particular National Crime Records Bureau releases data. Okay, so NCRB, this is known as NCRB. Okay, it works under the Ministry of Home Affairs. It releases data related to criminal offenses in India on a 2 years gap. Okay, so this particular data also suggests that India has a very high rate of suicide that people are committing. Okay, so with that, keeping that particular thing in mind, we are now going to understand about what is a crime under this particular section 309. Okay, so the section 309 of the Indian Penal Code dictates the penal provision for attempting suicide. If a person is suffering from any mental trauma or illness, he or she should be given reformative treatment rather than a deterrent punishment, which is simple imprisonment for a term which may extend to 1 year or with fine or with both. Means if a person is has committed or has tried to commit suicide, in that case he will be it will be considered as an illegal act, and he will be sent behind the bars, means he will be given a simple imprisonment that may extend to 1 year, or some fine may be applied, or both can be applied to that person. But this particular author is saying that, like, you know, putting someone under this particular, you know, criminal like a criminal act who is committing a suicide is not good, because a person tries to commit suicide only when he is under severe stress, and we should take reformative steps rather than, you know, taking making deterrent laws that, you know, prohibits a person from committing a suicide. Okay, although the deterrent works to some extent, but the thing is, it does not work in all the extent. And the author also says that the most of the penal provisions that we have in India, we have inherited these provisions from the British government. And Great Britain has itself decriminalized suicide in the year of 1961. Okay, but India still continues to have that particular provision in our Indian Penal Code. Okay, so this author is saying that, you know, a bill was introduced in Rajya Sabha, okay, to repeal this particular criminalization of suicide in the year of 1972, but it failed to pass in the Lok Sabha. Okay, so that is one thing. Apart from this, we are also going to understand what are the case laws that talks about, you know, criminalization of suicide, and that talks against the criminalization of suicide. Okay, so we have witnessed a century-long tussle between two camps, means like there are two group of people. One group of people advocate that, like, suicide should be treated as a criminal offense, and the other group advocates that suicide should not be treated as a criminal offense. Okay, means like attempt to suicide should not be treated as a criminal offense. Okay, so one group advocates that penal provision, and other group continuously demands that attempts to suicide be decriminalized. Okay, so those who favor the penal provision, okay, so those people who favor that there should be a penal provision for attempt to suicide, they cite this particular judgment, which is Gyan Kaur versus State of Punjab 1996. Okay, this is a very important case law. You should note down this particular case law. It will help you in answering a question related to this particular topic in your mains examination. Okay, in this particular case, which is Gyan Kaur versus State of Punjab, the court has held that right to life is a natural right embodied in Article 21 of the Constitution, but suicide is an unnatural termination or extinction of life, and therefore incompatible and inconsistent with the concept of right to life. In Aruna Ramachandra Shanbag versus Union of India in 2011, the Supreme Court endorsed the earlier judgment. Okay, so this particular thing, so this was a judgment, okay, from a court of law in India, Gyan Kaur versus State of India, and there was another case which is Aruna Ramachandra Shanbag versus Union of India. In this case also, the court has retained this particular thing, that, like, although Article 21 says about right to life, but the same article does not provide for right to termination of life, okay, by a person. So this particular case law is towards criminalization of attempt to suicide. Okay, on the other hand, if we talk about those case laws that are against the criminalization provision, okay, related to suicide, so let us discuss what are those cases. Okay, on the other hand, those who argue that the act of attempting suicide should be criminalized, quote Maruti Shripati Dubal versus State of Maharashtra. Okay, so there is another case which is Maruti Shripati Dubal versus State of Maharashtra 1986. Okay, this particular case is a very important judgment. Okay, in this judgment, the Bombay High Court, okay, declared that section 309 is unconstitutional, and the court has said that, for example, the freedom of speech and expression includes freedom not to speak and to remain silent. Okay, so freedom of speech or speech and expression also includes freedom not to speak and remain silent, and at the same time, freedom of association and movement likewise includes freedom not to join any association or not to move anywhere. if this is so, logically it must follow that the right to live will include also right not to live, or not to be forced to live. Okay, so the Bombay High Court, okay, has actually read the provisions of the section 309 inconsistent, okay, means like inconsistency with these provisions of the fundamental rights in India. Okay, so they said, like, criminalization should not be considered in the attempt to suicide, means like it should not be criminalized. Okay, so the court also said, like, this is the judgment of the Bombay High Court in this particular case: if the purpose of the prescribed punishment is to prevent the prospective suicides by deterrence, it is difficult to understand how the same can be achieved by punishing those who have made the attempts. Okay, now they are saying, if someone has already attempted, now if you are criminalizing that particular act, so how are you going to deter, how are you going to stop that particular person, because he has already attempted to commit suicide. Okay, so this is the thing. Now what is the solution, what is the way forward? One of the solution is given by the Parliament itself. Okay, so Parliament has passed the Mental Health Care Act. Okay, and section 115 clause 1 of the act, of this particular Mental Health Care Act, this is a very important act, okay, provides, notwithstanding anything contained in section 309 of the Indian Penal Code, any person who attempts to commit suicide shall be presumed, unless proved otherwise, to have severe stress, and shall not be tried and punished under the said code. However, this law applies only those suffering from mental illness. There is presumption of severe stress in case of attempt to die by suicide. Okay, so this Mental Health Care Act says that if a person is trying to commit suicide or has attempted to commit suicide, in that case it will be presumed that that particular person was under severe stress, and under severe stress situation that person has committed, tried to commit suicide. So in that case that person will be given medical treatment. Okay, and so this particular act presumes that that particular person is mentally ill, or like he needs some kind of psychological treatment. Okay, but what if severe stress is not proved? We have to shift from penalizing attempts to suicide to make such cases medico-legal. Okay, so now here the author is saying that if it is proved that that particular person was not mentally ill, in that case that particular case will shift to the medico-legal case, where the person who has attempted to commit suicide will be provided psychological or mental treatment. Okay, so this is the thing that was said by the Mental Health Care Act. So you should note down about the Mental Health Care Act as well. Okay, so this is one of the solution that was provided by the by this particular act, Mental Health Care Act. Okay, so what we have understood from this case, that in India the attempt to suicide is a criminal offence under section 309 of the Indian Penal Code, and there are some case laws that talks about criminalization of suicides. On the other hand, there are some other case law that talks against criminalization of suicides, and the Mental Health Care Act of 2017 provides for an alternative arrangement. It says that a person who is trying to commit suicide is under severe stress. Okay, so you should just revise this thing, and you should note down the most important provisions that I have discussed. Okay, so having understood this, let us now talk about another topic. This topic says towards a more federal structure. This topic is important for UPSC mains examination under economy section. Okay, so here we need to understand a political dimension first before we enter into the economy dimension. Okay, in India we have a unitary form of government. What do we mean by unitary form of government? It means that the union government has more power as compared to the state governments. Okay, so India is a quasi-federal in structure. Okay, India has a quasi-federal political structure. At the same time, if we talk about the United States of America, the United States of America has a federal structure. It means that the state governments have powers, okay, and the union government over there, means like the federal government, okay, they have some other powers. So like they have concurrent power on different areas, okay, so they are equal to certain extent, okay. But in India the central government has more power as compared to state governments, okay. So the author initially talks about this particular thing, and then the author makes a case related to devolution of financial autonomy to the states. How the author talks about it, let us discuss about it now. So it says, if states directly collect more tax, they will become less dependent on the central government, okay. We are going to understand about direct tax provisions in this particular article. So let us discuss about this thing. So preserving the unity of India was a great concern at the time of independence, okay. The author says that the rulers of Travancore, Hyderabad, Jodhpur, Bhopal and Junagadh wanted their own separate countries, and in October 1947 Kashmir was invaded with the backing of a very young Pakistan government, okay. Goa was liberated from the Portuguese only in 1961. It was natural that India opted to be a union unlike the US, okay. So India opted at the time of independence that it is going to be a union of states, not a federation of states, okay. So that's one debate that the author says. And apart from this, the author says that the direct taxes in India comprises of two components. One of the component is income tax and the other component is corporation tax, okay. So direct taxes comprises of this income tax and corporate tax, okay. So so this particular thing, so here the direct taxes in India are collected only by the central governments, okay, means it is collected and used by the central government. On the other hand, the direct taxes can be collected by the state governments in the USA, okay. So state governments has almost equal power as that of central government. In India, it is collected by the central government, and later on the central government shares a portion of the total collection with the state governments. So what it does, basically there are many states in India that have like greater level of economic development in their states. They are taking rational measures, and the taxpayers are equally contributing to the government in paying their taxes. At the other hand, there are some states in India that are not that have not grown to the extent that other states have made, okay. So they contribute very less to the total share of direct taxes to the central government, okay. So there is a developmental disparity between different states in India, okay, developmental disparity. There are some states, for example, the Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and if we talk about Delhi, so these are the states that have that contribute around 73% or 72% to the total collection by the central government in case of direct taxes. And other states, for example, if we talk about states of UP, it just contributes about 3% in the total direct tax collection. Bihar, it comprises very less, okay. So out of the total collection from the direct taxes by the central government have to share around 41% to all these states put together, okay. And this is done as per the recommendation of the 15th Finance Commission. Earlier, the 14th Finance Commission has recommended this percentage to be 42%, but 15th Finance Commission made it 41%. Why? Because recently the government of India has created few new union territories. So earlier there were some states, those states were now made union territories. Like one of the example is the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So Jammu and Kashmir got bifurcated, okay. Now we have union territories over there. So union territories actually are directly controlled by the central government. So that's why there was a reduction in the total share that the central government will have to make to the state governments, okay. So that is one case. Now what is happening? So this financial devolution, or like finances are given to the state government by the central government as per the recommendation of the Finance Commission. Okay. So state governments get funds from the central government according to the Finance Commission's recommendations. Okay. Though this is based on some formula, but the author says like some, most of the time politics play their role in this particular devolution of the finances from the central government to the state government. Okay. And apart from this, the central government also applies some kind of cess. Okay. And whatever the central government gets out of this cess, they do not share with the state governments, and that amount, that particular thing amounts to 3.5 lakh crore rupees. Okay. So state governments also raise their own funds largely through taxes on liquor, property, road and vehicles. At an all India level, the states get 26% of the total revenue from the central government. Okay. So at an all India level, if you talk about the states, they get 26% of their revenue from the central government. Okay. Central government also shares 41% of their total collection with the state governments, but like if we talk about total revenue of the state governments, it comes out to be 26% for the state government from the central government. Okay. So some of the so-called poorer states get up to 50% of their total revenue from the central government. Okay. Those states are Bihar, Uttar Pradesh. Okay. So majority of their fund comes from the central government. So these states are financially dependent on the central government, and central government uses this particular provision for its own benefit. Okay. And it plays with the politics of the central state relations. Another issue is regional disparity. Okay. What kind of regional disparity we have? Like Maharashtra, Delhi and Karnataka contribute the lion's share of the taxes to the government. Okay. These three regions along with Tamil Nadu and Gujarat contribute 72% of the total revenue. Uttar Pradesh, which makes around 3.12% total, contribution to the direct taxes for the central government, it gets around 17% from the central government. So there is a regional disparity in the total collection of the taxes by the central government from these regions and the total share that the central government makes to these regions. So this particular article actually talks that here the author is saying that we have regional disparities in terms of financial devolution to the states and financial collection. So the central government should look forward so that it should give the authority to the state governments to collect the direct taxes for themselves, and if it is done, the state governments will be more capable of managing their own finances according to their needs. And at the same time it says that it is going to strengthen the center state relations. Okay. What it is going to do? It is going to strengthen the center state relations. Okay. And that is very important. Okay. So the author has given lot of suggestions. So the author is saying like we should look beyond the current framework, and if we look beyond the current framework, this particular thing, the state government should be allowed to collect the direct taxes themselves, and this requires some kind of understanding between the central government and the state government. They should work on case to case basis, like on what areas they can cooperate, so that the state government should not be much dependent on the central government. Okay. So you should just read this article for more clarity. Okay. So having understood the second topic, now let us take another topic for the day. Let us read the heading. This topic says Supreme Court seeks government decision on ex gratia payment. Okay. Now we need to understand what do we mean by the term ex gratia, okay, or ex gratia, whatever you read. Okay. Ex gratia means someone is paying to someone else without the other person putting in obligation or liability to repay. Okay. So this is done on favor. I mean, like the central government is making payment to the COVID-19 victim families. Means like COVID-19 is a pandemic that is ongoing, right? Many people have died, and so the families of those people who have died, those families will receive some kind of ex gratia payment, okay, from the central government. Why they will receive? they will receive according to a particular clause in the Disaster Management Act of 2005. What is that clause? We are going to discuss about it now. Okay. So why Supreme Court is there in the picture? Because many of the families, okay, many of the families of the COVID-19 victims, means like there are families from whom one or other person has died because of COVID-19, and these families actually so let me discuss it with you clearly. The Disaster Management Act of 2005 has a provision where it says that if a disaster is of national character, if there is a national disaster, and if because of that particular disaster a particular person dies, then the relative or dependent of that particular person will be given an ex gratia payment of 4 lakh rupees. Okay. So the central government has already declared this particular thing, this COVID-19 as a national disaster. So as per the provision of the Disaster Management Act, the people who have died because of COVID-19, their dependents and their family members should receive a compensation amount of 4 lakh rupees from the central government. But the central government is not making payment to them. There has been a lot of delay, and it seems that the central government has not taken a decision whether they want to make the payment or they don't want to make the payment, or they don't want to decide at all on this particular case. Okay. So that's why the Supreme Court seeks government decision on ex gratia payment. Supreme Court says whether you have made a decision or it is a case of not a decision making at all. Okay. So that's why, and the people, the victims, they have actually approached the Supreme Court. They have said that the central government is not making payment. What is the case? Like, we should be receiving payment on a speedy basis, okay, because we are facing financial hardship. The central government, the representative from the central government has responded to the Supreme Court, and that person has said that the center is now focusing more on making arrangements to manage the pandemic, like managing the vaccines, managing oxygen supplies, and managing other health facilities to actually tackle the pandemic. Okay. So that's why they are not focusing too much on ex gratia payment. They are focusing more on managing the pandemic at this point of time. But the Supreme Court of India has said categorically, it has said that like you cannot, the center, like the Supreme Court said to the center that the center cannot give an it cannot give an excuse, okay, that it does not have money to pay, okay, to the victims in case it is a statutory obligation on behalf of the central government to make the payment of the families of victims of COVID-19. Okay. So this is the case. Okay. So here what you need to understand, you need to read the Disaster Management Act of 2015. You have to read some provisions from that particular Disaster Management Act. Okay. And so one of the section of the Disaster Management Act is section 12. Okay. The section 12 of the Disaster Management Act says that that this if there is a national disaster, and under that particular disaster if someone dies, that person will receive 4 lakh rupees. And so there was a notification by the central government on that behalf in the year of 2015, and later on when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, this government has already declared this to be a national disaster, a disaster of national nature. Okay. So that's why you should just keep a tab on this particular issue. There will be further developments, there will be further articles, and you should keep a tab, and you may expect a question in polity section, okay, or in disaster management section related to this particular thing. And this article also says that section 12 was only recommendatory in nature. Okay, means like section 12 of the Disaster Management Act is only mandatory in nature. And so there was an argument that the Disaster Management Act has moved away from one-time cash relief to a larger issues of wider impact such as preparedness, risk management, mitigation, rehabilitation and reconstruction. So the central government points that instead of giving one time relief, we have gone for a multi-pronged approach. We have prioritized on preparedness. This is not a one-time disaster. Okay. So this is all about this particular article. So having understood this, now let us move to the next topic for the day. This is going to be the last topic. Okay. So this topic says Indian officials met Taliban. Okay. So this was highlighted by a Qatari official, an official from Qatar. Okay, Qatar. So this topic is important under UPSC mains examination under international relations. Now let us understand what is the development. Okay. Now let us understand what is the development. Okay. So as you know that the United States and NATO, they have recently declared that they are going to pull back their troops from the soil of Afghanistan. Now with their pulling back of their troops from the soil of Afghanistan, there is a likelihood that the Taliban is going to gain more authority in the legitimate sphere in the Afghanistan. So Taliban is now going to have more power. It is going to be a key player in Afghanistan. So that's why different countries are now molding their foreign policy stance towards Afghanistan. And India has been pro-development in Afghanistan. India wants a stable Afghanistan. India wants that Afghanistan should develop to its maximum potential. India is not very much concerned in the internal politics in Afghanistan, but India wants a stable Afghanistan. So since transition of power is happening at this point of time, so India cannot be silent, and at the same time it cannot take any particular side, because India has helped the established government in Afghanistan in various developmental measures. India also trains the Afghan army personnel, okay, in Indian soil. So that's why recently a high level meeting, okay, from between an Indian official and this Talibani people happened in Qatar, okay. But like it has the Ministry of External Affairs did not explicitly had a press conference to discuss about what it talked with them, but like there was a indirect hint by a official from Qatar. Okay, so Qatar is another country in the Middle East. So one of the official in Qatar has said during a press conference that like I understand that there was a meeting between the Taliban official and the Indian officials. Okay, so this is the thing, this is the context in which this particular article was there. Okay, so now if India has taken a step in that behalf, it is more likely that India can play a key role in in the development that is happening in the Afghanistan, because like there is a Afghan peace process that is going on to pacify the Taliban, and Taliban is now seeking more legitimacy in the government. Okay, so let us see what is going to happen in near future, and we should keep a tab on this particular issue, how India is going to recalibrate its foreign policy stance towards Afghanistan. Although it has a very stable policy that India wants a stable Afghanistan, India wants a development oriented Afghanistan, India wants a peaceful Afghanistan. So whatever key players are there in Afghanistan, India wants to have a say on it, but India does not want to go into the internal affairs in Afghanistan. Okay, so with this we have completed all the articles in today's discussion. Thank you so much everyone for attending today's session. I hope you have a good day ahead. Thank you.
Live online classes are as effective as offline classes. Ethics with S. Ansari remains the best ever choice. Do you know that ethics paper is the only paper in general studies that pays more with less efforts? One can easily secure 130 to 140 marks. Luqman IAS is a well-established name since 2014 for ethics paper. We offer 3 types of courses: Ethics Foundation course, Ethics Case Studies, and Ethics Test Series. Since 2015, Luqman IAS students have maintained the records of securing the highest marks in this paper. Ethics Foundation course is starting from 21st of June 2021. Classes will be for 4 days in a week from 11 am to 1:30 pm. The course duration is of 60 days and the videos will be available for 75 days. There will be 43 classes, of which 35 classes will be focused on theory and concept building and 8 classes will be dedicated for case studies. There will be over 180 case studies and 3 tests. Since 4 months are left for prelims, one can easily finish the ethics paper before prelims itself, and it's a good opportunity. So why to wait? Contact us today for more information.